Audacious Rebel. Today's guest is a vessel of remembrance, a spiritual guide, an energetic coach, a healer who works with the breath, the body, and beyond. Born beneath the southern stars in Savannah, Georgia, into a lineage of indigenous royalty, freedom fighters, visionary, and sacred disruptors, he carries the codes of ancient rhythm and future alignment. With over a decade of experience coaching athletes and professionals and nearly 10 years teaching the youth, he now serves the world as a bridge between worlds, gross and subtle, personal and cosmic, ancestral and universal. Prepare to receive transmission through breath, presence, and poetic power. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the path of the audacious rebel, RasRAH, RasRAH Evolution Enzymes. Welcome.
Eternal gratitude. Thank you, family. Blessings. Glad to be here.
You know, I am intrigued. I really am intrigued for more than one reason. But before I expound a bit, can you identify what or who is RasRAH Evolution Enzymes?
Excellent question. Absolutely. Yes. I am an eternally evolving being of light. My journey has led me to adopt this title, if you will, this moniker through my experiences. Yeah, and it's been an evolution and an evolving identity. So, growing up, I was heavily in. I come from a family of leaders, as you mentioned, military background, coaching and backgrounds, leadership backgrounds, walking with the ancient ancestors during the freedom fights in this country, the civil rights and things of that nature. And so I was always led by discipline, if you will. So my younger days, I was a big athlete guy, football, basketball, track and field, won a couple of championships and had some good performances or whatnot. But through those days, there was always something missing or something wanting, if you will. I had a few experiences as a youth, but one that stood out particularly was standing in the church pew in the upper deck at Big Bethel AME Church in Chicago, Illinois, and at one particular point during the sermon, the pastor, a female pastor at that, um, it was the first time I had ever had heard a female pastor. I always like to mention that, but I started crying out of nowhere. Didn't understand it. Didn't know why. I was smiling. I looked up at my mom, and she looked down at me and said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "I don't know." And it just kept coming down. And from that experience, at that moment, I said, "Oh, this is what they must mean by the Holy Spirit. This is what they must feel when I used to see all the older ladies jumping and dancing and, convulsing in the aisles during the sermons." It's like I had never experienced this before. And from that moment, I believe started my evolutionary path to RasRAH. Ras being a title taken from the Ethiopian culture in the emperor of Ethiopia, Ras or Ras Tafari, and then Ra being the name of the sun god or the Egyptian deity Amun Ra. So Ras meaning head and Ra meaning god of the sun or sun god or god of light. So I adopted the identity of the God of light, or the head of the gods of light, being born with the beginning of my name, R.A. And the first letter of your name is very auspicious and very telling to your path. If it begins with an O, if it begins with a hard letter, a S or a T, and these type of things. So the uh, fact that I chose to incarnate in this time, in this realm, with the name Ra. Rashid is my birth given name. Um, it made sense to me to continue. I also am a solar adept, certified as a divine conscious soul, in that I communicate with the sun and with all light, because all light comes from the sun. And I have a YouTube, RasRAH Evolution Enzymes of the same name. And I have hundreds of videos of me talking with the sun, communicating with the sun blinking and returning communication back. Something that a lot of people are not used to or have never seen before. So I invite everyone to go over to RasRAH Evolution Enzymes and give yourself a treat. It's a blessing and a download. So from there, through my studies and my involvement in life and consciousness expansion, I grew into RasRAH. Yes, the evolution
Understood.
enzymes is. Yes, I just want to also say the evolution enzymes part. We are here to evolve our consciousness, to expand and grow our perspectives. What I do as a guide and as a healer is I provide a catalyst for that, which is an enzyme. Enzymes are, for anyone who doesn't understand or know, enzyme is a molecule or particles that help to catalyze metabolism or processes. So I am one that helps to catalyze or continue or to aid in the process or the development of evolution. Give thanks.
Got you. So, before we officially begin, I want us to take a deep breath and really feel it. You know, breath is perhaps the single undeniable marker of the living. It's the first thing we do when we enter the world is inhale. The last thing we do before we leave it is exhale. Breath is both automatic and voluntary. It happens without our thinking, yet we can also choose it, shape it, and direct it. And yet, for most of us, we move through life without ever truly acknowledging its power. But do we really understand how significant it is, how it connects the body and the spirit, the seen and unseen? And today, our guest, RasRAH, will be taking us deep into that mystery, into the art, the science, and spirit of breath. You know, Rashid, RasRAH, the theme for this season podcast is entitled The Divine Human, Remembering What We Are. You describe yourself as a vessel of remembrance. In your view, what is it that humanity has forgotten about the breath?
Thank you. In a word, the essence, what it is exactly. Like you said in the introduction there, we've forgotten, and I think we've forgotten because it's so readily available. I think we take advantage, or we take for granted the things that come easily. And the breath is one of those things for many. Some don't breathe so easily. But one thing that the ancients and the ancestors knew and expressed with clarity is that the breath coming from the air, coming from the atmosphere and the environment, carries knowledge, carries wisdom, carries energy and electricity. It is well known that for every 10 feet of elevation you go in this realm's atmosphere, there is another higher and more intense level of electromagnetic energy. That's why you hear about monks building their ashrams or temples on mountains. You hear about spiritual people in high elevations meditating. That's because the air up there is definitely different, and it allows for a clearer and more grounded, if you will, meditation and thought process. Um, it is true that our thoughts and our consciousness is one with the environment and with the air. It is not localized within our bodies. So as we breathe, we take in the information environment from around us. So much so that the breath or breathing by itself through different modalities or techniques can change the consciousness, can change your mood, can change your attitude, can change your thought process. And I think a lot of what we today as a society and as a people um, are looking for is that change, that tool, if you will, to bring us back into ourselves, because this world does an awesome job at giving us things to pay attention to. Some might call it distractions, so a lot of us have a challenge in focusing the mind or allowing the mind to focus, if you will. Excuse me, not so much a act of will, but more of an act of surrender or an act of allowance, wherein we intentionally take the time to stop and just breathe. I recently, earlier this year in January, I attended a 10-day silent meditation, Vipassana meditation retreat, in which the technique that was taught was one of simply paying attention to the breath and breathing. Why? Because the breath, like you said, is going to occur automatically, autonomous. I think that's the word, autonomous. Yes, nervous system, right? So following the breath in thought as you feel it going out and feel it going in is a exercise, pure in and of itself, because that concentration allows the mind to focus without distraction. When I first got to the retreat, it was tested, or it was challenged of us to simply breathe and focus on the in and out of the breath for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 1 minute if you can. Many of us were unable. And I challenge your audience and yourself as well, whenever you have an opportunity, just sit, close your eyes in silence as much as possible, in solitude as much as possible, and close your mouth and breathe through your nose. And just feel and follow the exhale and the inhale. And see if you can do that for 30 seconds without any other thoughts, without going off into another idea or thinking about what you have to do tomorrow earlier, or what you had for dinner last night. Only focus on that breath. And that in itself will help to strengthen the mind and strengthen the countenance, so that we can have that peace that many of us are seeking.
I guess that's why, in meditation, when they start teaching meditation, they talk about just following the breath, right?
Absolutely. Follow the breath. Mm-hmm.
You know, I know you outline having come from a lineage of indigenous royalty, carrying the code of ancient rhythms and so on. Did you always have this understanding of the breath as more than a biological function? Where and how on your personal journey did you come to your present understanding of breath being something sacred?
Yes, give thanks. No, to answer the initial question, I did not always have this understanding or this awareness, if you will. Like I said, I grew up as an athlete, say an elite athlete, in that I performed at high levels. And in doing so, there was a lot of training, a lot of cardiovascular. So it wasn't until my college days, moving into higher, levels of athletics, that I started understanding the relationship between the breath and my speed output. Because I was really focused at one time on getting faster, being able to run that sub 4:40 yard dash. So in that training, it was revealed through studies and research that the speed is a formula of involves the amount of breaths you can take in conjunction or multiplied by or divided by the number of steps. So in speed training, the idea is to start off the run with intense high breaths. All right, and in learning that, it actually did. I used the technique, and it actually did help to improve my speed. So fast forward that about, I'd say maybe 10 years, yeah, through my path and journey, all around the world, figuratively, in my own little space, but uh, began to study astrology and met a master teacher who introduced me to his master teacher. Actually, one of the teachers I'm speaking of, you had on this podcast not too long ago, Sifu Oyi-san. And he was my teacher into
Right.
astrology in the early days. And then he introduced me to his master teacher, Dr. Mitchell Earl Gibson, affectionately known as Master. And in those classes, if you will, in those studies, I began to understand and practice tantra, yoga, meditation, as well as Tai Chi and Qigongs. All right, Sifu Oyi is a master teacher of Tai Chi as well as Qigong, which is breath work, is what Qigong translates into. And with these with these teachings, I was able to gain a higher and greater level of spiritual power, spiritual achievement. As I mentioned earlier, I was able to achieve the status of a divine conscious soul in communication with the sun. And through all of these techniques, the breath and breathing was one of the foundational tools that I was presented with. Meditations such as the microcosmic orbit that encourages us to create a energetic loop within the body with the breath, as well as a meditation known as the living soul meditation, also known as the ancient breath of seven. Is a technique that my master teacher Mitchell Earl Gibson introduced us to and used extensively to achieve some of his spiritual and meditative goals or accomplishments. So, in using these diligently and with intention, I have found a and with the Vipassana meditation experience, which was just recently, I've found I guess for a lack of a better phrase, a tool that is available to us all that allows me to expand and to grow exponentially without reserve and without restriction, because again, the breath is available to us all.
Can you walk us through how intentional breathing impacts the body's energy centers and even our DNA?
Absolutely, thank you. Anyone who's familiar with physical training, working out, or anything like that, one would understand and know, or at least have heard, that focusing on the muscle group that you're using during the time of the exercise produces greater results. The same is true with anything that we do. So breathing is no exception. When we focus on the breath, we bring into awareness the internal organs. We bring into awareness the consciousness. We bring into awareness the spirit. And we bring into awareness and concert the mind, the conscious mind, which, as I mentioned earlier, is so busy with life in general. We rarely have time for solace, for time for repartee, time for relaxation. And as Sifu Oyu always mentions, relaxation is the key. So when we focus on the breath, it takes on a different energy. When we pull it into the nostrils or into the mouth, and one thing I will mention is that the breath is 70% responsible for expelling the waste in the body. Yes,
Okay.
70% of the waste in the body is expelled through the breath. And it is encouraged that we exhale or breathe in general through the nostrils as opposed to the mouth. That is how we were designed. But even doctors and dentists will tell you that mouth breathing is unhealthy, right? So when we take the time to breathe consciously, as I mentioned, the air, the because your every thought carries a vibration or energy. Every thought produces a protein that goes into every cell of the body. So when we have the thought that we're going to focus on the breath and we're going to allow the breath to nourish us, that thought changes the electromagnetic frequency and current around us, immediately around us. Most of us have an auric field that stretches 10 feet away from us in all directions. So at that moment, the energy and the electromagnetic, the quality of the electromagnetic uh, space is enlightened and heightened to a vibration, a higher frequency. So therefore, the air that we pull in within our personal space is now electrified and empowered with the energy of the intention. So if our intention is to be calmer or to be peace, if our intention is to connect with spirit, if our intention is to communicate with God or to listen, all of these, all of these intentions are now empowered, and the breath or the air, the atmosphere is intelligent. So it knows when it enters the nostrils, down the esophagus, into the lungs, into 8 chambers of the lungs. When we breathe deeply, it is now it is now doing work. It is now working to cleanse the cells, scraping and scouring the cells of any a general term, anything that no longer serves. All right. And it is pulling and pushing that out back into the atmosphere to be transmuted for recycling. So intentional breathing allows us a sense of power, a moment of control, and an instant of peace that we have the option, the opportunity, and the ability to extend that moment, that instant, by continuing the breath beyond the meditation or beyond the focused intention. And that is the major difference in intentional breathing versus non-intentional. But even in that, having awareness of the breath, just in everyday movements and your mundane existence, being aware of how you're breathing. Sifu Oyi Sun teaches us that there are 2 types of breath. There is an adrenaline based breath, which I alluded to or mentioned earlier during my training. That breathing is done in the upper chambers of the lungs, in the chest. Anytime we're breathing in the upper chambers or in the chest, or doing what's known as chest breathing, we're producing adrenaline. Sometimes adrenaline, a lot of times, is not what we need. The other breath is the Buddha breath, all right, where we breathe intentionally into the lower gut, also mentioned or referred to as the lower dantian. We have 3 dantians, some may be aware: lower, middle, and upper. We breathe into the lower dantian, allowing the belly button to expand on the inhale and contract back towards the spine on the exhale. This breath is what produces melatonin, or serotonin, I should say, which is the calming molecule, or the calming nervous system substance that comes with our thoughts. So being aware and having intention in that regard to remain calm by breathing in the gut as opposed to breathing in the chest is a gift of awareness that I think many can utilize and take with them from this right now, right here today. If you just stop and notice, a lot of times we are breathing in the chest because, like I said, the mind is so busy. The mind is so busy and so distracted that we're adrenaline based, and there are always things to do. But if we catch ourselves and drop the shoulders and drop that breath into the gut, then that will change the perspective, that will change the electromagnetic field and vibration, and allow peace to return. So I believe that is, from my perspective, the difference between intentional breathing and just living, being alive, if you will. Because, yeah, breathing might not necessarily be living, but at least you can say you're alive. Excuse me.
You're surviving. You said, breath affects the nervous system and the brain. It also affects our energetic body. How do you explain this bridge between science and spirit to someone who is skeptical?
Excellent question. One thing that I like to acknowledge and mention is that science, as we know it today, is a very young discipline. It's very infant in comparison to the wisdom and the knowledge of the ancients. I will say as well that science, for the most part, from my perspective, is not necessarily a discovery discipline. It's more of a explaining or information divulging discipline, wherein a lot of times they are simply revealing the detailed explanation or a empirical perspective of things that we were already aware of and already engaged in practicing in our ancient cultures. So I actually dated a biological scientist at one time, and master's degree level public school teacher, and very tangible consciousness, very sensing consciousness, as many of us are. We gravitate to what we can see, touch, taste, and feel, right? The physical aspects of our reality. Once we or that mate of mine began to explore the breath, explore consciousness with the eyes closed, explore the inner realms, one is presented with depending on the intention, depending on the sincerity is most important. I fear only my lack of sincerity. one is presented with a lexicon of wisdom. Any question, any idea, any thought that challenges one can be presented in that internal space, much of which is not available in the empirical science or research that we are known of today. I don't claim to be a scientist or a master of the science of traditional sciences in the mainstream. However, just through wisdom and general studies, my degree is in psychology, child psychology and personality development, to be specific. And so, in explaining or in discussing the science versus the mystic, if you will, I often take the science with a grain of salt that can be validated through the mystic. Because what is real is your reality. What is, I would say, assumed is what science tells us or presents us. Until these things are experienced personally, it's all a assumption. Perhaps a very good assumption and or hypothesis based off of research, because the scientific method admits that it doesn't know. It created the scientific method so that it can validate the idea or the thought, whereas the ancients or the mystics validate this through experience. And that was also one thing that was a major theme in 10-day Vipassana meditation, was that we are here for what is the word? Experiential discovery. So experiencing the divine for yourself, experiencing the breath and the sensations that are present constantly throughout the body through focusing on the breath and calming the mind. Experiencing for yourself the presentations of science. For example, there is much in the astronomy scientific field that is not necessarily the facts in the astrology scientific field, as well as some things that are presented in the biological scientific arena that is not necessarily considered fact or accepted in the mystical science arena. So I would say to anyone deciding the validity of the mystic or the spiritual versus the science or the scientific, I would say they both have their place. I would say to, as my master teacher, Mitchell Earl Gibson, always advises us, follow your heart.
Follow your heart. A lot of people have got in a lot of trouble following their heart. And then sometimes.
What I was saying is that I did preface much of what I said by saying, depending on the sincerity. So, yes, the idea of follow your heart or follow your own mind is kind of a misnomer. You want to follow your heart and follow your own mind when you filled your heart and filled your mind with light and with positivity and with the divine, as opposed to with ESPN or CNN and so on and so forth, the things of this world. So yes, be very careful in following your heart. Be aware of what your heart is filled with first, before taking that advice, I will say.
You know, RasRAH, if the breath shapes the mind, can changing the breath literally change who we are?
Yes, 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 yes. Well, I will say emphatically yes. I'm going to go into a little deep into my spiritual bag here, but as a practicing mystic, I am aware, and it is my perspective and awareness that each living soul is a divine being in itself. And all divine beings have their own breath. They have their own frequency, their own depth, their own style of breathing. So, in that, as well as we all have different DNA, we all have a subtly different type of breath. So, more so than changing the breath, I would say being aware of the breath, making the breath a part or a friend of you, being in communication with the breath and with the ka, if you will, as it's referred to in some ancient and mystic circles, being in relation with the ka, that is the atmosphere, that is the air, that is the breath, is more so what will change one's countenance, one's perspective, one's life. As I mentioned earlier, meditation is a intense and focused, intentional breathing practice that, yes, does aid to change one's life, change one's perspective. Because as I said, what it does is it brings down the adrenaline and allows for what I mentioned as the Buddha breath, but also growing us and evolving us into the Buddha consciousness. I think it's universally known that the figure referred to as the Buddha was one of great peace and great wisdom, great intelligence, and great spiritual power. Not necessarily spiritual power of a mystical or magical sense, yet that is also factual as well, but spiritual power in the sense of your own, not to use the word spirit, but your own essence, your own energy, being able to bring that under more control. So many of us feel powerless in today's world. So many of us feel in default mode where we're being pulled or we're being controlled or guided by whatever is next to be done. The breath and being in concert and communication and relationship with the breath will absolutely change that life of that individual. You will begin to be aware of when you're breathing in the chest and be able to shift the energy of the lower gut to produce more serotonin. You will be able to calm and express a more expanded perspective, because a lot of times our perspective is tunnel visioned or very constricted. So taking the time to stop and breathe helps to expand the consciousness and give us a wider perspective. One of my master teachers, actually Master Mitchell Earl Gibson's wife, referred affectionately as Asharia, Kathy Gibson, always says, before answering a question, just stop and breathe. Allow spirit, allow higher vibrational, higher thought frequencies to marinate, if you will, to in yes, to come into the consciousness, into the cells, so that we can respond with with light, as opposed and respond with uh, under and overstanding, as opposed to responding to be right or responding to be validated. So, yes, to answer your question, conscious breathing, creating and having a relationship and awareness of the breath can and will absolutely help to change your life. A lot of people are looking for a silver bullet. It is not a silver bullet. It is not a silver bullet. It is not a silver bullet. It is a tool to be utilized in conjunction with other evolution enzymes to create a greater and more accepting quality of life. Thank you for the question.
You know, it's really something you mentioned, Master Gibson's wife telling you about taking a breath before answering questions. Because I recall years ago looking at people like Eckhart Tolle, and when he's asked a question, he would take a minute before responding. And I would always say, why does he do that? you know, he would. So now, and I used to laugh because I started to play that. I started to play the game, like take a breath. But I never understood why he did it. But you just did. And I appreciate that. Really do appreciate that. You recognize the significance of a lot of things. And, you were explaining earlier science and spirituality. And yes, science is discovering things that spirituality always knew, but probably never had the words, but was based on application anyhow. Because the ancients lived a particular way, you know? So breath work has been described as a form of inner alchemy. How can it transmit trauma or stagnant energy into clarity and vitality? And I ask this because, our last season we dealt with crime. And one of the key factors that have been identified as responsible for crime is that of trauma. Trauma. How can breathwork transmute trauma into clarity and vitality?
Gratitude. Excellent question. Yes. Oh, see, I just did it myself. How breathwork can aid in transmuting trauma is one, as we mentioned earlier, bringing us into a space of peace and calm. Initially, or in general, I will say, we don't normally take time or take the space or have the intention to listen and be with ourselves. Much of our trauma, or yes, much of what we perceive as trauma is just under the surface of our identity, of our everyday existence. And that surface can be cracked and penetrated by being with ourselves. I won't sit here and say that it's a easy or a simple thing. I'll say it's easy, but not simple. I will say it's not complicated. However, not often practiced. Many times we have an aversion to being with ourselves. Many times we have an aversion to being with our own thoughts. Sitting and focusing on the breath allows the thoughts to calm, allows the spiritual energies that are within to begin to come to the surface and do the work. The body is an amazing, eternally self-healing machine, as long as we give it what it needs to continue its work. And breath is one of those. Calm, stillness is one of those. Silence, peace is one of those. So as I said, it's not a silver bullet. It goes in conjunction with other tools and modalities. But yes, incorporating, focusing on the breath in stillness, excuse me, in solitude allows for the recognition of what is referred to as sankartas. So this was also introduced and taught in the Vipassana Buddhist meditation retreat. So the sankartas are our deep ingrained karma or karmic energies and karmic um, things we carry, right? So in Tantra or Tantric studies, this is referred to or relayed to the what is known as the fascia. All right, many are familiar with the term fascia. It is a sort of, I like to refer to it as the mycelium network of the muscular system, or the skeletal system, if you will. It is a sort of a webbing or a connective tissue or a connective energetic field throughout the muscles that is said to hold the traumatic experiences throughout our lifetimes. So, qigongs, breath work in the tantric and tai chi system are known to dispel, clear, and cleanse the fascia. So we are able to dispel, transmute, and release our trauma, our traumatic experiences, our traumatic thoughts, our uh, default thoughts from the traumatic experiences through Qigong, aka breath work, all right, and intentional breathing. So, yes, absolutely. I love that question. Breath work, man, I pray and implore and encourage anyone who has the opportunity to view this, especially if you are incarcerated, if you are in a constricted environment, or in a place or a space in your journey and your path in your life right now where you feel like the walls are tight and you feel the effects, or you're remembering the traumatic experiences from your youth or even past lives, because we carry those thoughts as well. Qigong breath works. I would love to come back on here at some point, or even now, if you have a time to take us through at least the ancient breath of seven meditation, but to introduce your audience to some Qigongs that would help to absolutely transmute those traumatic experiences through the releasing and cleansing of the fascia. So to answer your question, yes, my brother, breath work will help to release and transmute our traumatic experiences. Definitely.
Wow.
Thank you.
You know, as much as we're hearing the greatness and the benefits of breath work, there are some fears and some taboos in certain circles where breath work and even meditation and yoga and so on is concerned. You know, it is stated that certain breathing patterns can induce mystical states, visions, or even out of body experiences. Can you explain what is happening energetically and spiritually when these things occurs, and why is there this adversity in some spheres where breathing and breath work is concerned?
I love these questions. Thank you. Because I had so much I wanted to say, but I was like, I'm going to let spirit lead. And thank you. Lean in, listen closely. The breath is a trap. The breath is your prison. The breath is what keeps us bound to this physical realm. You want to leave this physical realm? Stop breathing. Just stop. When you stop breathing, or when you slow the breathing, the energy of the body, the energy within the brain, the mind, the energetic centers within the body are enlightened. They kick on a sort of a default network mode, if you will, wherein the slower your breath or the longer you hold your breath, the more you activate what's known as your immortal genes.
Mm.
Your cells are not yours. You are not your cells. You are not your thoughts. As Sifu Peter Andreas, Nine Dragons, has taught us, you are pure essence. The breathing and the breath binds us to this realm. The absence of breath introduces us into the divine or the spiritual realms. You'll understand and know and maybe even remember or recognize that the ancient mystics and the spirituals or spiritualists of today even practice meditation in a way that slows the breath. This is for the purpose of engaging the divine or the mystical realms. Yes, many, or I won't say many, some experiences in the past into those, on the path into those mystical realms has resulted in or produced unfavorable experiences. But it's like I said earlier, before you go within or into your inner realms, you need to be careful of what you've been filling your heart with. You need to be careful of what you've been filling your mind with. Even the ancients, it was known that in ancient times, of course, there was no electricity. So when darkness fell, there was fear that accompanied that darkness. We made fires and we made different things to produce light to dispel the darkness because it was known and assumed that negativity or danger was held in the darkness or stayed or resided in darkness. So at times, people did this type of work, this deep inner work or this deep breathing, still holding or carrying the fear or still holding and carrying darkness within. And when you go within, the first thing you're going to experience is yourself. Before you ascend into higher realms to meet the, ancestors, the ascended masters, the angels, the gods and goddesses, so on and so forth, or whatever your faith suggests, before that, you're going to meet yourself. And sometimes what we see or what we're introduced to, but that is a gift. That is a gift of awareness to now we have the ability and the choice to transmute that again through the breath work, because much of it comes from trauma, the fears that we hold, and to choose a light or a faith-based perspective versus a fear or a darkness-based perspective. One thing that Master Mitchell Gibson teaches or taught us was that we have to be very careful and aware of what is known as the Lucifer program, or also referred to as the skeptical mind. It is definitely a program that comes with this realm, when you're born. Babies, when they first come in, don't have a skeptical mind. They don't have anything that they're intrinsically afraid of. So the skeptical mind and or the Lucifer program, which is constantly present and a tool of darkness and a distraction in this realm, has to be brought to awareness. And like I said, these things need to come to the surface to then be dispelled. So having awareness that we have a skeptical mind and we have a fear-based programming is one thing that will help to anyone who's doing this work will help to protect and guard during the work. Because like I said earlier, spirit is intelligent. And when you come to spirit with sincerity and with clarity of intention, then you can be guarded and protected by your highest divine self. So I will say that, yes, we acknowledge that at times in the past, some have had challenging experiences going deep into meditation or deep into breath work, as the breath will take you into a expanded or heightened consciousness. We do say, as another one of my teachers, Grandmaster Baba Kalindi Iyi, would always say, when you don't get the experience you're looking for, do more.
My Audacious Rebel family, you've just experienced a conversation that, if you really breathe it in, can shift the way you live from this moment forward. Breath is not just what keeps us alive, it's what can make us fully alive. My hope is that you can carry something from today's dialogue into your own practice, your own stillness, your own becoming. If this episode resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to remember the power within them. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Path of the Audacious Rebel on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Do so now, so you never miss these transformative conversations. Until next time, stay present, stay conscious, and stay audacious. Audacious Rebel. Audacious Rebel.